Hi, I'm IKEA, and for today's video I want to give a build showcase on a Hunters Fury, and specifically two ways to set it up for SMGs, as that'll be the scope for this video. As of course we can set it up as well for Headhunter, especially it's very popular of course with the Regulus and double shotties, or even with shotguns themselves, and they have also got a new way with a double companion. But for today, I'll be specifically talking about SMG versions, and especially one version that I like for solo and one that I feel works well in solo and in groups as well. And as always, we'll be making extensive use of the build collection, where I've also added in actually today an recommended folder for Hunters Fury. At this point, it only contains a few SMG and shotgun ones. It'll get a few more in the coming days as I'll add them in, but we'll be using the build pictures from there. And everything, of course, will be linked down below, the build collection itself and the build pictures that I'll be using today. And as with all my showcases, it'll be split up into two major chapters. In the first chapter, we'll go over the build, the layout, and the two variants that I'll be discussing today. We'll go into some numbers afterwards in that same first chapter by going through a spreadsheet with calculations about them. And then in the second chapter, we'll take it into some gameplay, in this case, some solo stuff and some group stuff. And I will try to give you some insights into how I play them and hopefully give you the tools to play them well yourself as well. So yeah, before we jump into the build layout, I just briefly want to quickly give an introduction into something that I've been doing a lot recently. And that is that for the last month, I've been streaming every evening over on Twitch. And I'll be continuing to do that for the foreseeable future as much as I can, although I will become a little less regular as work picks up again after the summer. But I'll try to be on there most evenings that I can, as I've been quite enjoying my time over there, just running around, doing the things I would normally do. And even, for instance, these build showcases, I nowadays record them live, basically, as I quite enjoy that, as having a little bit of interaction with the chat and just hanging out and talking about stuff, and sometimes even getting questions that are pertinent and will make it into the showcase, basically, just by talking about them and getting some feedback from the chat. So yeah, if you enjoy my content, I would very much appreciate it if you at least check me out over on Twitch as well, which is linked down below. IKEA87 is my channel name over there. And yeah, I very much hope to see you maybe over there as well. And now back onto the build. And here is the main SMG build we'll be focusing on today. And this setup is what I would consider the best all-round setup, where we have 4 pieces of Hunters Fury, and we are specifically avoiding using the Hunters Fury chest or the Hunters Fury backpack. Now, to start off with Hunters Fury, at 2-piece, we get some shotgun and SMG damage bonuses. These are basically specific weapon damage bonuses. We'll be making use of the SMG one today, and also usually secondary will be the Scorpio, so we'll be even using that part. On 3-piece, we get 100% health on kill and 20% armor on kill, and that's actually pretty good, especially for solo play or when you're in open world and you get surrounded, you will heal yourself up pretty consistently, and it's quite a good bonus. But then especially, of course, at the 4-piece, we get the main mechanic of Hunters Fury, which is that enemies within 15 meters receive a debuff. They'll receive a mark above their head, basically. And against those enemies, all of your damage or all of your weapon damage is amplified by 20%. And that's quite strong, of course. That does mean that you really want to play close range, which is basically what the set is all about anyway to begin with. It is very much a run and gun build where you try to get close to enemies and then kill them, because also your main weapon type, although of course here we're using SMGs, are pretty close range. So yeah, you do want to be within that 15 meters to get that 20% bonus. And the second mechanic of the 4-piece helps with that, in that when you kill a debuffed enemy, so any enemy with that mark above their head, with your weapon, which is specifically that you can't do it with skills or such. They will disorient others within a 10-meter circle, within 5 meters of them, but a 10-meter circle around them, of course. They will get disoriented. And that is quite strong because you can kill one enemy, the weakest one of that pack, and you will disorient them all, and that will give you some time to continue killing. And you also receive, every time that you do make a kill with on an enemy that has the debuff, you will gain a stacking buff that goes up to 5 times of 5%. And this amplifies weapon damage, is actually one of the few remaining true multiplicative stats in the game, where this is not just 5% additive up to 25 with 5 stacks of it. This is actually, each is a separate multiplier in the same way that Intimidate currently is, or Striker or Heartbreaker used to be. And that means that at 5 stacks, this is around like 27% already. So that is a decent, pretty decent buff, although of course it falls away in 10 seconds. And you could increase that with the chest, but the common consensus is that we avoid the chest because while it does increase that timer, having this stacking buff alongside another multiplier in Obliterate or Intimidate is much, much more preferred. Now, if we move on to the backpack and the chest, which are the two pieces where we don't use the Hunter's Fury, I have chosen here to go Grupo and Sokolov, and this is what I would consider the preferred setup if you're not going with what we'll be using in the second setup that I'll show in a build picture and will be the first build that we run around with, which is if you use a Memento, then a Cheska chest is better. Without it, Hunter's Fury is one of the few gear sets where, because we are using SMGs, which have an innate crit chance bonus, and you can stack even more with their mods, it is one of the few sets that is very much not even crit starved, but somewhat of a crit glutton. So you're better off actually avoiding Cheska, stacking a lot of crit chance on the weapon itself, 36 in this case with its stat and 3 crit chance mods, and then going Sokolov and Grupo, or 2-piece Sokolov, because that ends up being the same, because the second piece of Sokolov is crit damage as well, which is the exact same thing as Grupo as well. So yeah, either 2-piece Sokolov or a piece of Grupo and a piece of Sokolov is my preferred way, especially for the Vigilance Obliterate version, which will be the main build that we'll be discussing today. On the backpack, I'm going with Vigilance. We'll be using the shield to keep Vigilance up. As long as you don't directly take damage, a Vigilance will stay up. And we'll be using the shield to hide behind. We have a few blue cores to help with that as well. And Vigilance is just so strong that not much competes with it. So while you could go, for instance, other talents here, most of them do not mesh well with just going for all-out damage, which, while this build isn't going for all-out damage, it is still a little bit of a generalist, because of course we could go with stuff like glass or such, or even crazy stuff like putting focus on a Hunter's Fury build. We're going with Obliterate, and that's the talent that we choose on the chest. It is quite effective with SMGs. It isn't that great for especially our Scorpio when we use that, because the SMG of course will stack this up into up to full in one mag. The Scorpio would need several reloads before it gets up to there, because Obliterate does not stack like Strikers or Heartbreaker, but every shot of the shotgun will only give you 1 stack, so it is quite slow for that. That's also why, you don't use Obliterate with the shotgun versions, but we're mostly going to be using our SMG as our main damage dealer, and the Scorpio is there as a backup. Moving on to some skills. What we especially want to have is a Revive Hive, because this is very much a run-and-gun build. You'll run into situations that you will get downed or killed, and that is just part of the deal that you make going Hunter's Fury. And the Revive Hive will if you're solo, get you back up without the assistance of allies. And even in groups, it unburdens your allies. It lets you get back up without anybody else having to give up their damage. And for the other one, what I really enjoy having is a shield, especially because we want to hide behind it to keep vigilance up. And here as well, of course, I'm going with 2 blue cores to keep that shield going for quite some strength. And in both versions as well, we'll be going with the striker shield, and that's especially for its damage bonus. This damage bonus applies to you yourself as well, as long as you have the shield out. And yeah, just having 12% extra damage is not something you can easily say no to. And there's even more synergies as well with Firewall with this build. If we move on to the weapons, of course, it's a SMG Hunters Fury, so I very much enjoy having an MPX, as you can see here as well. This one's graded to 20, so I must enjoy it well. And the MPX is very much my very preferred one, mostly because it comes with quite a high optimal range of 22 meters, where most other weapons are in the 16-meter range. But I also recommend either the MPX or the Banshee. Both of them are quite outliers in the SMG category, the same way that the FAMAS kind of is in its category. We, of course, also have the Vectors, and especially, of course, Dark Winter and just the normal 45 Vectors, or even the 9mm Vectors, which rule the burst in this category, but their main disadvantage is damage per mag. And while solo, you can quite easily make them work and work well, especially Dark Winter, and that's why it's quite popular for there. I find that I would usually rather have a little bit more damage in my mag, but they are still great choices. Other choices that you have as well is Emmeline's Guard for even more perfect preservation and getting even more armor out of it. And the P90 is a decent enough gun to use. Lady Death usually lands in my hands, especially if I'm using Hunters Fury in leagues, where it also very much shines. For if you're running around on hard, everything dies even faster, and you will always have that run speed buff up. And many other weapons as well work decently well with it. So you can play around, especially with which SMG you like. But the recommended ones are especially the MPX and the Banshee. And solo, the Dark Winter or just the Vector 45 is also decent. Now, if we move on to the build pictures, and before we go into the build pictures, here are actually several builds that I've added into a Hunters Fury recommended folder, which is now live on the build collection. It is still a little bit sparse with only 4 builds in it. I'll be adding quite a few in there already in the coming days. But of course, especially the 2 SMG ones that we'll be using today are in there already, together with a shotgun one and one that I'll be showing here as well, which is a different variant of going SMG with Ridgeway. If we go into the build picture of the build as we had it there, and I make it a little bit bigger, we can see that everywhere that every piece has crit damage. All of the pieces that have 2 stats, they have crit damage next to crit chance. So that is where our crit chances are coming from. And all of the mods are crit damage as well. And that makes it so that together with the SMG and the watch, of course, we are already reaching a very respectable 58 crit chance on this build. And that's kind of the thing why we leave out Cheska, because we don't really have a great way of incorporating Cheska into here without actually it being a little bit lossy, because really the only place we still can swap crit chance to crit damage is on the weapon itself. And there, of course, it's 5 crit chance for 5 crit damage, and that doesn't really make sense. One thing you can do is actually use the Firewall 10 crit damage mod on weapons that can use it, but that's also mostly the weapons that are both the MPX and the Banshee can't, for instance. The 45 Vector can. So you could use that to bring in a Cheska, but the common recommendation is usually to go Sokolov and Grupo, or 2 pieces of Sokolov for this specific version. And what you can see as well is that I've chosen to go with 2 blue cores, and that is kind of my preferred way. I like to have a 2-tier shield. That's kind of like my sweet spot. And that's also going to be the case for other builds that we'll be going into here in a minute. And one thing I wanted to make note of as well is that I'll be using graded weapons, or there are here with on the build pages with graded weapons. And in the solo sections coming up, I actually will not be using a graded weapon, just to kind of give a more clearer picture, especially as not everybody has, of course, access to grade 20 weapons. And later on in the group section, I will be using graded weapon, as I'll try to basically show how powerful Hunters Fury can be. And if we then move on to the other variant, which is the first variant we'll be running solo, this is with Memento. And this is kind of a version that I very much like, as the Memento really fits in well here. When we do go Memento, because we are losing one of, or we can basically lose one of the crit chances, Cheska kind of makes sense. And in this way, actually, it is the preferred setup. As while we do actually go to 60, and actually we are 62, which is, of course, getting capped down to 60 with Cheska. That is actually the preferred setup over Grupo, and lands with a better ratio of crit chance crit damage. And then you, of course, can go crit damage mod on the Memento. One thing you can do as well, if you only have a Grupo chest, is the difference is actually quite small, but then you would have to swap either one of the mods or one of the rolls somewhere to crit chance. The difference is under 1%. So while the Cheska one is preferred with the Memento, it's not completely required. The difference is minimal. And here as well, the pieces that were blue cord now have gone back to being red cord, because again, I only really want to have 2 skill tier or 2 tiers on the shield, and this blue and yellow from the Memento are providing me that already. So just to recoup some damage, because of course we're losing a damage talent on the backpack with Memento, and even once it stacks up, it's adding to weapon damage and not total weapon damage as it did with Vigilance that it's competing with a little bit. I kind of like having it be just those 2 tiers from the Memento. Although, of course, the blue cores on a Hunter's Fury, just to make that clear, are very much to taste. So you can add or remove blue cores as you see fit. And you basically give up damage for survivability, which is, in some cases, a very reasonable trade to have. Because, yeah, you could, for instance, still go with even more blue cores with this Memento. That would give you a little bit more regen, that would give you a little bit more bonus armor for every pickup that you make. So that is actually a decent choice. But this is me making this recommendation, and this is the way that I like it. If we then move on to another version, which will be not part of this showcase really, but I just wanted to briefly show it, and that's going Ridgeway. And Ridgeway very much lets you also go Wicked quite easily, because of course you will bleed enemies. And as well, you get to go Sadist on the weapon, and Sadist is a very strong talent. And that even actually kind of makes up for losing out on a damage chest talent by a little bit, because it's 20% amplified. It isn't actually 20% weapon damage as it states. It is an actual amp. And that means that compared, for instance, to something like Strained or such, you are actually... It is, which lands around like 10% for this build, or Optimist also around 10%-ish with some blue cores. Then if you consider that 10%, and then you kind of like have 10% going kind of like as a chest talent, but of course that would be a super weak chest talent. But you, of course, get that regeneration, which is kind of nice, and you bleed enemies, which slows them down and stuff. So this is also a viable thing, but of course, as it is also in that folder, it is my least recommended one, but still recommended, because there are also, of course, variants that get made that never make it into a recommended folder. One thing I want to touch here on as well, as if we go back to the main picture, is you have quite a lot of options for the talents on here. Because I'm, of course, going Vigilance Obliterate, which is my preferred thing to do with SMGs. But especially, for instance, if you want to go shotguns, or also even with SMGs kind of works, is either Memento with Intimidate or Bloodsucker with Intimidate. But even on the backpack as well, if you aren't as efficient with the shield, for instance, one thing you can do is actually use Wicked, even on just the Obliterate one without Ridgeway. because that disorient, that group disorient will trigger it, or you could even trigger it with the Scorpio, just shooting once with the Scorpio, and then you have it for several seconds, and then you will keep refreshing it while you're disorienting enemies while you're killing them. One last thing as well, of course, that we didn't discuss yet is specializations. And if I jump us back into game, really the only two specializations that in my mind really make sense with this, especially the firewall makes sense with this, and gunner can kind of make sense with this. I'll be using firewall for all the builds in today's showcase. It has, of course, that group buff or that group increased damage to enemies that are within 10 meters of you, which is really great. It gives you access to the striker shield, the special firewall shield, which gives you a lot of bonus damage, making up for making you quite a lot stronger. And also, for instance, even the small things like its med pack is really great. Its armor pack is really great, letting you heal back up and even really be aggressive for a few seconds starting out while it's still active. And even that it's, if you get armor broken, the nearest enemy to you will catch on fire. Which usually is also the enemy that armor broke you in a second ago, giving you a respite and letting you get back into cover or deal with them. Gunner is really great for its extra armor on kill, and of course its damage buffs for armor for RPM on kill are pretty good. Especially that armor on kill, having another 10% alongside the set's 20%. Does make a noticeable increase and can actually really be great, especially on like if you enjoy playing on challenging or such, or even on league runs and stuff, where you don't need that extra damage. But if you could heal up a little bit more per kill, then you could go a lot faster, which I quite often do, for instance, for league runs. The other specializations all have stuff that kind of can work with it, but none of them fit, I feel, as well as firewall, especially, and gunner somewhat. Because, for instance, technician would give you another skill tier and let you get access to fire or the flatline talent. But then you'll be losing the striker shield, which already as well brings up weapons quite a lot as well. I find the synergies of firewall are basically unbeatable. And yeah, having discussed all that, let us jump into some of the numbers. And here's the calculation sheet that I've prepared for today. And of course, this with all of the build pictures and such as well will be linked down below. And if you have not seen these before, these are calculators of my design, multi-calculators where we can compare up to 10 builds. And there's a video on my channel nowadays which explains them quite well and goes a little bit in depth. But just to give the short version, output happens up here, input happens down here. They're color-coded to match with the input and the outputs. And what it spits out especially is a burst DPS number and a sustained DPS number, and also numbers to match it up at the range so that you can check if you've done the calculations right, because then these numbers will match with in-game numbers. And I've made sure, of course, to check that, and they do match. Now, starting off, we are comparing everything as well to these, to the build in the top slot. All of these percentages are comparing to the build in the top slot. And that build is this Glass Vigilance Red. And I've often, well, always in these build showcases, compare builds against a Glass Vigilance Red, an Obliterate Vigilance Red, and an Unbreakable Vigilance Red, because I feel most players will know them quite well. As they have lost a little bit in popularity, they are still quite popular, and most players will know kind of how they feel. And these are high-end reds with a FAMAS weapon. And at the bottom here as well, I've put a Obliterate Striker, the one from my showcase. That setup basically with a Cheska chest, with Obliterate and a Coyote as a comparison as well, because of course that's the current top dog. Then if we look at the two versions of Hunters Fury that I've prepared here, this top one is from the Obliterate Vigilance version with the Sokolov Grupo, and I've prepared two sets of numbers for it, one as a 6 red, so all the cores being red, and one as I had it basically on the build picture with 4 red, 2 blue cores. And what we can see actually is if we compare them to the Glass Red, that we are exceeding a glass red worth of damage, which, well, on the 6 red variant, and even on the 4 red 2 blue variant, we are basically matching a glass red on burst. And this might kind of surprise some people at how much damage output a Hunter's Fury can have. But the thing, of course, is that the glass red, first off, is from the first shot. It doesn't need to charge up its an obliterate, and it, of course, can do it up to, for instance, with a FAMAS, up to 28 meters. And the Hunter's Fury does need to be within its 15 meters, because I am using the Hunter Fury mark buff as well here in this calculation. I'm not using the shield because, yeah, both could be using the shield. I'm leaving that out, and also I'm leaving out weapon talents on top of this as well. But we can see that it's actually, yeah, very strong, especially in the 6 red variant. It ends up almost 15% more than a glass red. It is, of course, still 30% almost behind the striker, but it is a very strong build if set up correctly and ran with good weapons. If we then move on to this second set, is that the Memento variant, so the Obliterate Memento variant, with 6 reds and starting out, so without the complete weapon damage buff that you receive from the long buff from Memento, and then with it active as well at full strength at 30 weapon damage from the long buff. And we can see that both of those as well actually do decently well. They are high damage builds still, not comparing, of course, with Striker favorably, but especially with older high-end reds, they very much compete on damage. Now, of course, this damage is a lot more almost in a conditional way of for instance, a chest striker. Here they are conditioned to be at close range, and range is usually very much the killer of a Hunter's Fury for some things. For instance, raids and such, where there are positions and places where Hunter's Fury can do well enough, but it can't. It is basically just those moments, and it can't be basically your general build, for instance, for a raid. But damage-wise, we can see that, yeah, it very much competes. Even with that Memento variant, where we're giving up the backpack talent, once the Memento is charged up, we're doing basically glass level or glass high-end red with the FAMAS levels of damage. But of course, we need to be close. One thing I want to make note here as well is I'm not using in these calculations the buff that stacks up to 5 times. And what we can see here as well is that it's actually quite a lot. It is 27.63%, because it isn't just 5 stacks of just 5 additive. It is multiplicative to itself. So it's basically each of those is a separate multiplier on its own already in the calculation. And while it only, of course, lasts 10 seconds, it can be really, really strong. Especially when you're, for instance, camping a doorway, you'll kill 1, 2, 3, and then you'll be having the buff for the 4th one, and then you'll kill that one even faster and then move on. So it is actually quite strong. It is one thing to never forget that buff is there. And if we then move on to this second section, I have prepared here that what happens, especially with the Vigilance Obliterate variant that we had there, going from all 6 red cores to all 6 blue cores, and basically every step in between. So going 5 red, 1 blue, 4 red, 2 blue, and so on and so on and so on. And that's just basically the weapon damage drops by 15 each time. But of course, you gain armor and you gain a stronger shield out of it. And what we can see actually is you lose basically 7% going from full red to just 1 blue. Around 12% going to 2 blue, which is basically where I pick my sweet spot. But we can see actually, even going to 6 blue, you're still at 64% of the damage. And that is, of course, because a lot of the damage comes from crit damage, a lot of it comes from the total weapon damage, a lot of it comes from detox and from the amp provided by proximity, the mark. So the weapon damage isn't the most critical thing in there, basically. So you could even go six blue cores, because actually, yeah, if we take this number, this burst DPS number of it, which is 4.8 million, and we scroll back up a little bit, that is basically what a high-end red unbreakable vigilance does. But of course, here we're doing it with 6 blue cores. And that's, yeah, that is quite strong, of course. You will have quite strong survivability. But for me, the sweet spot is kind of 4 red, 2 blue. But especially those blue cores, as I said in the layout section as well, are very much to taste. So you basically have to decide how many blue cores you want to take into it. Now, I've prepared also another small part here, which we'll just briefly go through, as I'll bring it up here, which is that I've prepared a filled-in talent calculator, of course, as well. And especially to talk about Strained and Optimist on those choices here. Now, I'll be running Fast Hands. I feel Fast Hands really synergize as well with both of the weapons as well, because they have really long reload times, but also with the build itself, because if you get caught reloading, that is usually when you die. So instead of that, I'll rather have Fast Hands over a damage talent. But if we especially want to look at Strained versus Optimist, which is really the two choices that you could go on Firewall, especially with it. Here we are at basically full red cores, and Strained will then beat Optimist. But I've basically here prepared gradations in between of going from the full red basically all the way to the full blue down there. And if I briefly, actually, I'll leave the circle up there on Optimist and Strained. If we equals this to, for instance, the full blue core version, which is that one, we can see that now Optimist, where it was losing out before, now wins. And this is basically the thing that Optimist really cares about, is how much weapon damage is already on the build. So here, because we're altering the amount of weapon damage by going more blue cores, Optimist gains an advantage and beats Strained quite handily. And that's also why on PvP builds, quite often, Optimist is the choice. And if you're interested in which one is kind of the sweet spot, where it's like flips between the two, that is very much around this 110 weapon damage here, which is 3 blue, 3 red. Their Strained and Optimist kind of line up with each other, so that's 110 in the middle, and then Strained and Optimist land close to each other. But actually, in actuality, I would say that around having even 2 blue cores, where Optimist is actually, in percentage-wise, a little bit behind. Optimist still wins here, to me. So even with the 4 red, 2 blue version that I am running, Optimist I would consider it to win, because Optimist doesn't fall away if you're not firing for half of a second. And Strained quite often can. So especially if you're running from enemy to enemy, for instance, in Summit, that is quite common. You'll be running in between enemies. Then Optimist basically wins out. So this is one of the few builds where, especially if you're not going full red, if you're leaning towards 2 blues or even more than that, then Optimist is actually a great choice. One thing I will note here is that the Memento, of course, is providing weapon damage, and then Strained actually wins out, because actually the Memento variant ends up at much higher weapon damage than the Vigilance Obliterate variant. And yeah, let's first take you to be introduced to the Memento version, and I'll briefly give it a short introduction, and then we'll take it into some solo gameplay. And here is that Memento version, as I showed it on the build picture as well. The only thing that has changed here is for this, we'll be going and doing some bounties. I'm going to use ungraded weapon, both my Scorpio and my main weapon. I also want to show off the Banshee and the Vector 45, so we'll be using those. And I kind of want to show it this way because that does eat away a little bit of its damage output and is more likely to be, you know, what most players will have it be as. And then, yeah, here as well, I'm using a Cheska chest, but actually if you don't have a Cheska chest and you do have a Grupo one, you can put that in, or even a Sokolov one. All three of them are within 2% of each other. If you don't go with the Cheska, though, you will need to have another crit chance roll somewhere, as here, everywhere else is all full crit damage. So yeah, let's go do a bounty. And we are sneaking up some some outcasts here, as we're going to go do a bounty here, and I'm doing that for a specific reason, which I'll explain once we've completed this one. But I'll show basically here the loop of Hunters Fury very well, which is just you kill some stuff, grab some memento stacks. You really want to continuously be walking over the memento stacks, especially if you can, of course, with shorter range stuff. Both to charge up your long range buff, but especially that short time buff as well is, or well, long time buff, but short time buff as well is very nice because it is basically 30 weapon damage as well. So if you can pick up something, and then like here, I'll pick up this one and use it to kill that one with well, I have that buff up, and then move to the next one and move to the next one. And that's kind of the gameplay loop of Hunter's Fury by for it. And yeah, you can kind of run and gun. You can kind of sometimes use your Scorpio to get yourself out of trouble. If you if you have too many big stuff in front of you, you can just swap to the Scorpio. You'll disorient and shock some stuff. As this one is a true Patriot, which at least makes it quite easy for me to deconstruct some stuff. Although, of course, a Red Patriot is a good build, although I already have one. We'll grab this key chest along the way, because we'll likely be pretty full up on keys with this character. I'll grab the bleed rounds here as well, might as well. And we'll go deal with them in the courtyard. And yeah, as well we're moving. The reason I've picked this area is in a second we'll pop a second bounty here, and there's a trick to it, and I've been meaning to show it, so I'll do that here. One weird thing, especially with this room, is actually, I'll discuss that here, is when you're running through it and you kind of stop moving, you kind of slide, which is one of the few places that it does that, where there's like water on the ground. And it kind of feels weird, especially when you're turning. And I wonder how many people actually, you know, I mean, most people will kind of notice that because the movement just feels weird there, but there are a few places like those. And yeah, very much just want to move from cover to cover, basically. I'm using these pillars here, which have been so easily placed for us to, to very easily move from enemy to enemy, and you kind of have to do that in play as well. That's kind of why as well, Hunter's Fury really works well in Summit. It used to be my preferred Summit build until I swapped over to Tech Tanks, basically. But yeah, they are very strong. And here we're just doing a bounty, no directives. The global event also isn't on, but I'm actually pretty good at this global event, so that would actually make this look better than it is, not worse. And yeah, we're just using that disorient, for instance, here as well, just to keep it going. And here, for instance, I have that the short range or the short time of the Memento buff. I also am likely on 5 stacks of the Hunter's Fury kill buff, and that means that I deal a ton of damage. I'm leaving that LMG, killing everything else. Once it's just me and that LMG, I can deal with him. I'm blind firing here, missed most of it, but still enough to keep my buff up. Although actually I've lost the short or the on-kill buff of Hunter's Fury. So they're with names, just because it takes a few seconds to kill them. It just, yeah, was just longer. Here I'm using the Gunner armor pack, because I used it just several seconds even after I've used it. I keep regenning armor, basically. And you can use that to, you know, just push into enemies. You're regenning quite a lot of armor, so you can just use that to go into them. These are these weeks where we still have these issues where the completion of bounties doesn't completely pop up, meaning that it's kind of hard to see actually exactly when you finish the bounty. Although there, what you can still see is in chat, you will gain credits when you kill the last named enemy there, but that doesn't mean completion. But at least you'll have some indication of it. And the reason I went and did the bounty over here is that I'm going to run across the street to here, getting cover here, although I got spotted by something. For the second run, I'll actually will take a dark, or not a dark winter, but a Vector 45 with fast hands, just to show that a little bit as well, because it just swapping weapons kind of actually changes the playstyle. And what I want to do here is actually, I'm going to pop a second bounty in this zone, and you will notice in a second that once we leave this, that it is exactly next to me, and they have already spawned in over here. And that's a handy trick that you can do with some zones. I've shown it, of course, already with a character that does not have any of the side missions done. But here, in this zone, you can also do it here, because the game really likes putting bounties here. So what I did there was leave the area of the mission boundary, which is indicated currently on the minimap, which is basically that area that I'm in. So going across the street where I was, and I popped another bounty, and the game put it here again. We have these hyenas and stuff. Although actually I need to kill one more of the Black Dusk. We're fighting Black Dusk for bounty. I forgot to reload there. And of course, with some of the open world bounties, even though they're mostly easier content than just farming open world, you still sometimes find yourself in a war zone. Here, I'm just going to run into this enemy, just finish them off. And the thing that the vectors really have, and the 45 vector that I'm using here also quite strongly has, is that it has very high burst. But one other thing I wanted to show here as well is we are, of course, at actually with that other weapon, we were on 62 crit chance technically, but with the weapons that can take long under barrel rail, what I've put here is from Firewall, the +10 crit damage mod. This is the only crit damage mod on weapons that actually kind of makes sense. So here I'm using that to drop myself down to 57, but actually this 57 and 151, if all my mods were full as well, this is actually also the preferred way of going with Cheska as well. And if you were in groups as well, leaving a little bit of a hole for a Coyote to fill up, which can be quite useful. But this way, with that 10 crit damage mod, is actually the preferred way. Because yeah, otherwise you're wasting 2 crit chance, which is not the worst. I mean, it's still better than the Grupo setup, really, just in full output. And here as well, once the Memento is kind of charged up, one thing that you also get from the Memento is the skill efficiency. And skill efficiency is actually pretty strong. You will notice that my shield is actually quite strong here. I might go down here as I took quite a few hits, but actually I didn't. My health gate saved me as I got hit quite strongly. I'll start recovering basically by killing that heavy, killing some of the stuff. I'm looking on the other side as there were some enemies there. I'll put this dog to the ground. They provided me with an easy thing to shoot at. And here I'll actually use cover and my knowledge of that they will melee me when I'm that close, but won't hit me if I quickly get into cover. In a spot where they can't reach, and it's just us and that dog. I'll just quickly deconstruct all this. And once we have some Memento charges going, that skill health actually does apply from skill efficiency, does apply to your shield. So this Memento one, even that it's the same 2 skill tier shield in effect, is actually a much stronger shield because of the skill efficiency from Memento. And that's kind of why I really enjoy this for solo play, because also in solo play you're not competing for those kills, so all of those kills are yours, unless you weak point kill. That's the only time that you don't get a Memento. So yeah, also it's not even just all the kills, but even when you're killing a turret, when you're killing a drone that gets sent up from a drone controller here or something, all of those things will drop a Memento as well. So it's not even that you need to find 30 enemies. As I didn't pick my target well there, what I really wanted to kill there was just something red to get a disorient going, but I didn't, and they all got away from me. But I'll just go around. And this is kind of the thing that Hunters Furies can do well, is just run around, kill some stuff. They're the original run and gun builds, basically. And once you're a little bit proficient with it, and of course here, for instance, as well, in the first run, I wasn't fully charged up on the Memento, but now I am. As I get sniped. As likely, yeah, that's likely the name, and they are very much a sniper. And they're outside of the range of that mark, meaning that I give up a ton of damage. You always want to basically have that mark above the enemy when you're engaging them. That is your indicator. Here with the shield as well, and just burn them down. Of course, that was a sniper boss, so that they die pretty easily. But yeah, as I'm showing here, it's very much a running gunning build. If you enjoy that playstyle, this is the way to go, I feel. As especially, for instance, together with the Lady Death. Although Lady Death isn't that great in PvE, you can kind of make really great plays and run around even faster. I'm going to toss a grenade here just to make everything move. They'll likely move first before actually engaging me. I'll kill the named here, because yeah, she's a sniper. She had special ammo as well. She scares me. I'll blind fire this guy. I'll blind fire this mini tank. I'll wait for it to just explode, and then that does count as a kill as well. So it's it disoriented its owner just because he was within range to be disoriented. So you can kind of use that kind of tactics, and you always basically have to be aware if you can kill something to disorient with. So yeah, there we did 2 bounties pretty quickly. Of course, solo on heroic, no directives. If you're really farming this kind of stuff, you should be doing it with many directives. But Hunters Fury can deal well enough with most of them, as especially as well with Fog of War on. That mark is actually really handy for spotting enemies, and one of the things I really like for it from in Summit. Yeah, in a second, we'll move on to a full red version of the Obliterate Vigilance version that I'll just take into some match-made mission, which isn't really the home of Hunters Fury, but I just want to show you kind of what it can do. As we're heading into Foggy Bottom, which is the invite that I accepted. So we'll likely be at the start of Potomac Event Center. As I'm quickly inspecting my allies, just to know what they are. A striker and a high-end shred. As I'm waiting for us to line all up. As, oh, likely these are players I actually just did a mission with, but one that I didn't pick in the end, because I joined quite late in it, but I was like, I'll do it with them. Potomac isn't really the best mission for Hunters Fury. It is very mid-rangey, but I will check what the targeted here is. Bellstone. Okay, so one of my allies is after a Bellstone backpack. One thing I'll show here as well, there's this one enemy, and one thing that suppressors can do is kill stuff without aggroing everything else. So I'll move up behind him, kill him with a suppressor, and not everything else is aggroed. Which is a minor thing, but yeah, suppressors do work somewhat in the game, of course. And there are some like weird moments like that where they can do something a little bit useful, because yeah, these guys were not aggroed, letting us move in and like pick our preferred targets at the start. I'll do the run and gun thing of a Hunter's Fury. Although, of course, I'm full red. I don't have any blue cores. My shield is pretty weak, but it will still work to take a hit or two, letting me keep my vigilance buff up, especially. So here, for instance, I'll use it, although I already lost my vigilance there because I pulled it out a little bit too late. I see a heavy trundling its way up towards us, and I'll go after other stuff. I can basically, as I take a big hit there, I'll go into cover, heal back up. This rusher is luckily not aimed at me. That hunter got destroyed anyway, so my allies likely have decent enough damage. Go for the backpack there. using the shield as well as my damage buff, because that's one important thing. Just pulling out your shields quite often, when it's the firewall shield, of course. But yeah, that 12% does apply to you. In rare cases, you can also have your allies, if they're smart, get in there and get the buff as well. But it's actually quite hard to be inside of that area and shoot effectively at enemies that are in it. So outside of coordinated groups, I don't think it happens often, although sometimes just incidentally it happens. Everybody will be camping a door together, and you'll be incidentally standing inside of the radius of someone else's firewall shield. As I take another big hit, this heavy is coming from me. I was hoping to get the heal off, but we didn't. I do have a hive, and that's what it's for. Sometimes you guys have to go down. It is okay to go down once in a while, as even though some people, of course, very much disparage any build that ever goes down. That's not what happens in the real game. If you play aggressive, if you want to do good damage, I could sit in the back, of course, and just pelt away at these guys with some very weak build with a lot of blue cores, or I could be 6 blue core here even, or something, as I showed on the statistics. It doesn't lose that much damage. It's still doing half of the damage of this build. But doing half of the damage of this build means that this build is doing double this damage. And sometimes the best method of getting through something is just to kill more. And that is not even true just in Division, but in many games. So here, just because we can kill faster, stuff is dying more, waves are spawning further away, nothing is getting a chance to set up a lot. And that kind of stuff makes quite the difference. More damage in a team is very noticeable. Its effects aren't just that stuff dies more, but yeah, they have the ability to, for instance, kill important enemies. Heavies don't get to linger around and just chip away at people. Although here, for instance, I feel that maybe my team doesn't have great range damage, because that includes me, of course, as well. I'll take a second to heal here, as I'm getting shot by my ally there. And yeah, sometimes, especially as a red build, here I'm full red as well. So I am very much, very easy to kill. I'm just putting shots of opportunity at those rushers, just because I might kill them before they get to an ally. And here, he got to get 2 very quick sledgehammer rolls off, as I usually get to roll away before it gets me. But there, my shield broke. I was disoriented from the shield break, and I rolled into him instead of away from him. And there, my allies had to get me back up. But I'm just going to be aggressive right away again, just because I kind of know that I can. And in the case of Hunters Fury, especially solo, not in this case that much, but especially solo, being aggressive is also your heal. Every time you kill something, you heal. So here I'm basically healing myself up by just being aggressive and killing. Now, of course, I'm trying to do it smart, as I know that there's not many enemies left, so I just go making it as many 1 versus 1s as I can. That's the kind of playstyle that you really need to do with Hunters Fury. If you are standing in front of a whole group, and you die from that, it's not that they shot you all that where it went wrong, it's that you stood in front of a whole group. I'll check if this chest has been looted. They haven't, as they have been running this several times. It seems as they are after something, a chest or backpack with some stats, as they said, but I'll pick up every chest and backpack and just have a look at them at the end with him. But they didn't know about that chest. There's a gunner shooting me. That's kind of why I came over here. There's this position here, where you can kind of shoot these guys and also be safe from that gunner. And also be close enough to have the... And yeah, that mark from Hunters Fury is kind of nice, because for instance there, of course, I know we don't have Fog of War on, but So I know there's an enemy close by there, but I don't know, of course, like exactly where he was until I noticed the Hunter's Fury mark on top of them. I'll go and kill this LMG because he's the last guy. And when it's 1 versus 1 like that, like I'm very confident that with my shield up as well and in range that I can just take them out. They've taken care of the other boat and the main boat, and we're gonna run up here.
Shit, Agent Kelso's not responding.
And move on to the next part where I'll actually, not intentionally, but incidentally show why sometimes Hunter Fury, especially in missions and such, and some specific content just doesn't feel great, because in this next fight, everything's a little bit long range. Now, normally you, of course, can kind of deal with that with high-end red, with strikers. With Hunter's Fury, while it does do that pretty decent damage, it needs to be close range. I'm going to see where my allies are setting up and if somebody's going for the objective, because I'll likely just set up here to start off with, which is the only place I really have proximity over at there. And even though I'll be out in the open, that'll be fine. As they went to trigger it. I'm going to toss a grenade over there, because there's always an enemy over there, and that can be an LMG, and that can hurt. As we do have an LMG over here. I'm actually not in range. I assumed, I'm in range to the right side there. But what I'll do is just push into here. Let's be what I said I should be, which is a run and gun build. And make sure that I kill the highest. That enemy has special ammo, which means that I will focus him down a lot. I don't want to be set on fire. And the elite ones especially, of course, put down shock rounds, which hurt even more. I'll run into these guys, kill that guy. And even with an SMG, which has worse accuracy and such, of course, spray and pray kind of still works, even at like those kind of mid-ranges there. I'll go in and push up on this right side. As we have a heavy actually that's not coming over, which I hope will not cause us to have issues in a second. He's not moving. The position he's at, I can actually shoot him, I feel, through that gate. That gate is actually not bulletproof. But for that, I'm looking for positions to shoot through, because you can also shoot through here, I believe. But it depends on if there's something in between us and him. Which is a lot of containers. I'll try to wake him up by tossing a grenade his way, and I'm dragging him back basically until it goes red. Hopefully that wakes him up. Hello, Mr. Heavy. And then, okay. And once he actually comes into view here, we can burn him down. And sometimes stuff glitches out like that. But so there, that is a handy trick to know as well. Tossing grenades at them, but then especially just basically aiming really far, and then it basically pulling back. So I'm basically pushing forward on the mouse, and it's coming back to me. Basically, tossing it as high as possible. And luckily that woke him up. There's a key chest in there, but I feel that that was the point that I joined these allies. And you of course can only loot once per day per character, which is one of those handy things that sometimes multiple characters will let you do a mission over and over again and get the key, get the chest. Or for instance, the key chest as well. Another fight where I'll be not as useful as I would want to be, but this is also good to show because this is kind of the limitation of Hunter's Fury sometimes, and that is very much that, range is its issue, where strikers and stuff are still mid-range, but can reach out to full range, still with decent potential. Here, Hunter's Fury, because you're not only just losing your optimal, you're also losing that mark buff of 20%. You're not disorienting. Enemies dying they need to be marked for you to get that 10-second 5% multiplicative buff from the gear set. You're not getting that. And of course, effective range of the SMGs is just low as well. So here, I'm like standing in a position that I kind of know that I kind of can like reach out and still touch someone. In a second, of course, they'll spawn downstairs, and I'll go deal with the downstairs one. Here I can close the range. I really want his backpack, or well, him totally then. That works too. And yeah, especially for instance here with this weapon, with Obliterate full there, I think I saw 1.1 million on a headshot crit. And yeah, those are decent numbers at 850 RPM for a crit. There's a chest back here as well, but I feel yeah, at this point everything will be looted. As I'm waiting for my allies, which is always the courteous thing to do, and I move in when there's 3 of us at the very least, preferably all 4 of us there. I'm gonna push right here, looking for rushers. There's only a purple one on the left. I'll use her, kill her quickly to disorient everything, buying me some time. I really want to get that rusher as I get staggered, double staggered, and get to test if my hive is still working, and it is. Luckily, I'm keeping the heavy busy at least. That's my excuse. That's what I did. I kept the heavy busy for quite a while. That's my excuse, and I'm sticking to it. That'll be on the official report. I'll go and kill him. My ally doesn't have a hive. He's far behind. I can go get him. Actually, well, can I? I was hoping that nothing was shooting at me, but my other ally is actually getting him. I'm going to use one of my med packs. While I'm healing, I'm going to push up with it. Because yeah, I'm still healing for like several seconds afterwards. And I could take a hit or 2. I would lose my vigilance, but that's fine. As I push in, there's going to be one more wave here. I pushed in too far and got myself set on fire, but I just blind fired there, and I'm just keeping these enemies busy basically by disorient them. Because yeah, that's actually one of the real powerful things of Hunters Fury, is just that disorient is actually very powerful. As another wave spawns, as I miscounted how many waves had spawned there already. And yeah, this heavy's coming from my face. I rather keep my face. I'm quite attached to it, so I'm just gonna fall back. I did get downed, but we're basically at the end of this wave anyway. And yeah, this sometimes is the thing with, if you're giving up survivability for damage, you will go down. But that's fine, as long as as long as it doesn't cause a wipe. We are still going faster likely than if I was a full blue build. As I try to push into enemies, and I get completely destroyed by several things that I don't even see what it was. As we're watching my ally, they have this wave basically. We did get to kill that rusher as it spawned in, meaning that they got destroyed by it. And yeah, sometimes while going aggressive, this is the downsides of Hunter Fury, sometimes you go down. Now there, I went down at a position where I was actually dangerous, and was dangerous for my team to get me, which is not my preferred positions to go down. But we did get through it. As I basically, what I should have done is not be as aggressive when I don't have a hive, which is my playstyle always. I'm aggressive till I lose my hive. Once I've lost my hive, I'll slow it down a little bit. But with Hunters Fury, there is no real slowing it down, especially the way that I'm set up currently. I need to close the range, and that's what I tried to do there, and I got blindsided by something that I actually don't even know. Because I don't believe it was a rusher, but suddenly everything, the world was on fire and my face was gone, that face that I was trying to keep. Here I'll push up onto this left side, I'll take cover here, and this is basically my new home now. And I'll mostly kill stuff on the left side here. I'll actually take a look. multiple of my allies are on that left side. I'll go across to this right side. Where's that? There's 2 of us on the left, 2 of us on the right. That seems more balanced. Yeah, because these enemies are within my range, and I still have like a position where I'm in cover, and if I can, like if I need to, I can basically stay in cover here. Although of course now everything spawns on the left side, as always happens. The side you pick is where the enemies aren't. Because yes, there I took a few rounds, so my vigilance is off, but actually vigilance comes back pretty quick. It's already back. And here actually I'm out of range for that hunter, or for the heavy. That's the word I'm looking for. And I'll actually push in a little bit and take a position here, which is maybe aggressive, but I have a hive again, so I'm okay being aggressive. And yeah, they killed them. But this also puts me in range enough for me to shoot several of the rushers, the elite outcast rushers, huggers, while they're coming out, hopefully, if I do it right. And that can make this fight a lot easier if we catch them pretty quickly. The boss also landed on me, and I'll just enter. I did take a hit, lost my vigilance again, but it's gone and it's back. See that heavy there? Gonna kill that red to try to disorient him, but he wasn't in range. When it's just this heavy, like, I mean, he seems to not have any AI there for a second, but so I'll go in here and loot that and this already. Wait for the next wave. I'm just gonna shoot that back on the ground just to get a fire going. Everything that'll come out will definitely then be on fire. So I see several rushers coming for me. There's something on that right side there that, yeah, there was a gunner there. I need to make this guy do the wiggle dance. Oh, there actually I got saved by the firewall armor break setting him on fire. He was the nearest target to me, and when he armor broke me, he got set on fire. There's only a few enemies left. I still had a hive, so I was okay being aggressive, and took, I feel, decent care of that boss. And I'm back up. We still have a few enemies around. This guy's going upstairs. Before he reaches that, I can take him out. And what I should have done actually there is grab my Scorpio and just Scorpio a few of the enemies. Just to get them CC'd, basically. Because, yeah, they'll stagger from the poison. They'll get disoriented. They'll get shocked and stuff. And that can quite often save you. That's also the reason I have it. It even had flame rounds, which I could have used. But I also had a hive, so I just used that. And after this fight, after this last wave, there's also a chest back here, although I'll likely have looted it, or he has the last time. And I'll briefly actually check what our end numbers were here, although of course this is with Outcast, so it's very much... you can't trust these damage numbers, as they are very buggy usually. But just from the kill count as well, we were, 3 of us were at the start of it. I feel I did decent and helped carry that, even though I did die completely once and I went down several times, as we have several revives here. But in the end, we did okay. So yeah, let's take this into the conclusion where I'll give you some of my final thoughts. And to conclude this video, the Hunters Fury Gearset is very much one that I quite enjoy for its run and gun playstyle. As I hopefully showed, it can do quite well, especially solo. Even in groups, in a high damage setup like this, it can work, although I don't feel I showed it off the best. But it is fun to play as aggressive and try to get the most out of the damage while trying to survive as much as you can. Although I failed a little bit on the survive as much as you can part of it. But we did do good damage, I feel, and helped carry that to victory. And of course, there are many ways to set up the Hunters Fury Gearset, as here we've mostly shown some SMGs, and there are even more really effective ways to set up SMGs, as we talked about with the Ridgeway, or even Intimidate with the Memento. And there's, of course, also shotgun versions, which will likely feature in a future showcase where on my build collection, there's a Scorpio with a double companion. And since double companion has been made to work as intended at this point, it is still quite effective with it. And of course, the famous one of Hunters Fury with a Headhunter with a Regulus and double shotguns is very well known for very good reasons, as it is very much the top meta build for a lot of farming and speed running as well. And likely in the future, it will make an appearance either in a showcase or at the very least in the recommended Hunters Fury folder. And for upcoming videos, it's going to be on the damage calculations, which is one that I'm very much looking forward to making the in-depth guide for and really going in-depth into it. As especially, of course, the calculation itself is well known, I feel, at this point, but I feel I can add some insights and some quirks of the system and explain them a little bit. And that's mostly there as well to lead into an in-depth guide into burst and sustain, because I feel we need to be on the same level of understanding a little bit before we can start talking about those. Especially the damage calculation one will be very much based in giving information that already exists a lot. But I feel in especially the burst and sustain video, I can give a lot of insights that may not be ones that everybody has. And yeah, so I very much hope you join me for those, or over on Twitch where I stream daily. And as always, have a good night.